Hi everybody, welcome back. Glad you could tune in again. Right here in London, it is about 6 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday, the 3rd of November. So I guess it's about midday where you are. And I know very well what must be occupying your TV screens and probably a great deal of your mental attention as well. At the present time, when you're not actively doing something else, you will be thinking about what most of America and a great deal of the rest of the developed world is thinking about at the moment, namely the outcome of your election and the immediate short-term and medium-term political future for the United States. And as I stand here, I have no idea what the outcome is going to be. Obviously, by the time you watch this on Wednesday morning or sometime afterwards, you probably will have a good deal more of an idea. You may have a very clear idea of what the immediate political landscape may look like, and I've therefore no idea how you're going to be feeling about that. Not being able to talk to you and not even knowing what the result is going to be, I don't know whether you're going to be somewhat anxious, perhaps even fearful, or whether you're going to be relieved or even joyful at the result. But I didn't want to let this opportunity pass without making some kind of comment on it. Now, at one level, my inability to see into the future is something of a handicap, because it's not possible really to respond to what the result is at this stage. There'll be plenty of time for that, I guess, among us as a church community in the weeks and months ahead. But of course, what it is possible to say, even from this position of ignorance, which I currently occupy, is possible to say something which remains true whatever the result is. And I hope, therefore, that just these few words may be encouraging and helpful for you as you approach your day and go about your business with a certain degree more knowledge of the election result than I have now. The danger in these kind of circumstances is that I end up saying things which are all but obvious to everybody. And if that's the case, I hope you'll accept my apologies with the reminder that sometimes it's good for all of us to hear the obvious, isn't it? I have in mind what the prophet Isaiah says in the 31st chapter of his book, Isaiah chapter 31. This takes us to roughly, it takes us to the reign of Hezekiah the king of Judah, at a time when the small nation of Judah was assailed by the brutal and violent Assyrians who had invaded through the north and were heading down south towards Jerusalem. And in the face of that terrifying invasion, Hezekiah the king turned to Egypt for help and protection. And Isaiah has something to say both about the tyrant Assyria and about the putative helper Egypt. In chapter 31 he begins by saying, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses and trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or consult the Lord." It seems that Isaiah feels that Hezekiah and perhaps some others in Israel have made a mistake in depending on Egypt and not consulting and depending upon him. At the same time, the Lord that is, has some pretty stern words for the tyrant in the face of whose oppression Hezekiah turned to Egypt for help. The Assyrians, he says, "The Assyrians shall fall by a sword, but not a sword of man. And that sword shall devour him, and he shall flee from the sword. And his young men shall be put to forced labour, and his rock shall pass away in terror, and his officers desert in panic, declares the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and whose furnace is in Jerusalem." In other words, the Lord has something to say both about the military and political enemies that the people of God feared, and about the danger of trusting in another who would seem to be a great friend, and perhaps who in many respects was, but who might easily lead them not to trust in him, in the Lord, the living God himself. You can see that he says to the Assyrians that though you look strong now, you shall fall. And to those who would turn to Egypt for help rather than turning to him, he says, well, that's foolishness. And so whatever the result that you are faced with as you hear these words and contemplate the day ahead of you on this Wednesday morning, if that's when you're watching it, you can see that there's something here which, I guess, how would you put it, it's a warning of a danger that we might succumb to, whether despair in the face of Assyria or confidence in Egypt when we should have confidence in the Lord. Wonderfully, Hezekiah, of course, responded to this in exactly the right way. And perhaps if you're struggling for inspiration this morning about where you should turn in the scriptures for your family worship or for your morning time of prayer and worship, if that's when you spend a bit of time reading the scriptures, then 2 Kings 18 and 19 might be as good a place as any to look. 2 Kings 18, of course, narrates a bit of the history of Hezekiah's reign, and chapter 19 is his response to the Assyrian threat once he's realised that he's taken something of a wrong step, and his prayer is really remarkable. I'll just read a verse or two from it. Chapter 19, verse 14. Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread before the Lord this letter that he'd received from the Assyrians, this threat that he'd encountered from them. And he prayed, beginning, O Lord, the God of Israel, who is enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. And with that recognition in mind, he continues, Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. And then he calls the Lord's attention to the mocking and tyrannical threats of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. Well, the Lord came good, and the Lord delivered him, because Hezekiah turned to him. And so perhaps that will be an encouragement to you this morning. May the Lord bless you, and I hope very much to see you soon. Bye for now.